And we are now live on Facebook. So I'm just going to give it a few minutes so that it pops up. Yeah, because it's also saying there's an error message. Oh, but it seems to be working. Let me just make sure that it's still working.
I could ask Randy if she would sign in, but oh, do you see somebody?
Well, I see myself, but there's a 26-second delay. And yep, it seems to be working. Okay, so I see some folks are logging in and they can see it, and they can see us, I hope. But so if you're there and you want to say hello, please enter that into the chat window, just to make sure that you're out there. But for everyone who's watching, welcome. I'm so pleased to have another one of our Facebook Live events. And yeah, it's not the same as getting together and chatting about all of things about Yukon's wildlife, but it's nice that we have access to this technology that makes it accessible to maybe so many more people who wouldn't be able to attend an event normally. So thanks so much for coming, everyone. Tonight we have Bruce Bennett. And Bruce and I have worked together for my entire career at the Department of Environment. Bruce originally hired me as a wildlife viewing technician. And so here we are. It's really amazing. And I've learned so much from Bruce over the years, more about soapberries than I ever thought was possible. And we'll always think of him when I see soapberries. But one of the great things, so Bruce was with the wildlife viewing program for how many years were you with the wildlife viewing program?
I think it was 15.
15 years, okay.
Yeah.
I'm close to catching you, but not quite. And but now he is the Conservation Data Center coordinator. And as part of that position, he coordinates every year a Bio Blitz. And bioblitzes are just a fascinating way to explore the natural world and picking an area, and you can do it in your backyard, you can do it in special locations. And so Bruce is going to share us a little bit about some of the bioblitzings that we've done around the Yukon, and maybe give you some hints on how you can contribute or get involved in the future. So I will go on mute, but I'm still going to be here, Bruce, if you need anything, and can't wait to hear about it. Take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Carrie. And I hope everyone enjoys this presentation. Please feel free to send messages to the chat or interrupt me, because I never know what I'm going to say until I say it. So I'm just going to be following along anyways. So yes, welcome. I'm the coordinator of the Yukon Conservation Data Centre. And so my first slide is about what is the data center. It isn't advancing. Why is it not advancing? Oh, there we go. Maybe it's just delay with Facebook. Anyways, I'll make sure I push the button earlier so that we've got more time. So what is the Conservation Data Center? I put my name up as a CDC, and I was at the University of Madison in Wisconsin yesterday, and they started to laugh because they said, "What do you mean you're the coordinator of the CDC?" Thinking it was the Center of Disease Control. And I said, no, in Yukon, that's the Child Development Center, but we're also known as Conservation Data Center. And we manage information on over 8,000 species of plants, animals, and fungi, which includes lichens. And there are 3 of us at the CDC. So here's me using a camera and a GPS with a mustache. So you can tell this is a slightly older picture. That was when I first started with the CDC back in 2004, I guess it was. And Sid Canning's back in, I think that's 1989. And Randy Mulder in 2010, but she hasn't changed at all. And so what is the CDC? Well, the CDC is a part of a network of conservation data centers that occur across Canada and the US. And so every province, state, and territory has their own conservation data center, or in the US, they call them natural heritage program. And they also call them natural heritage programs in Ontario as well. And even the Navajo First Nation has its own conservation data center. and we all work off the same database, and we share the same types of scientific standards. So if I say something is critically imperiled in the Yukon, it means exactly the same thing as it would be if it was critically imperiled in Tennessee. So that's really helpful when you're trying to communicate across a wide area. And our data is used around the world to help look at species diversity. And so, for instance, the consortium of, or the Center for Arctic Flora and Fauna uses NatureServe data for ranking circumarctic species. And the vision of NatureServe is really to look at biodiversity so that we can understand biodiversity. We can use that not only for planning protected areas, but also to provide managers with better information. And so the BioBlitz fits really well into NatureServe. So what is a BioBlitz? Well, the BioBlitz, a lot of people think of it as a treasure hunt for scientists. So doesn't matter what discipline you have, you go and try and find as many things as you like. But you don't have to be a scientist. That's the nice thing. You can just use your phone and try and photograph as many different things, individual things, and then the experts can help you figure out what you saw later. It's a fun way to learn about more things. So yeah, I take pictures of things I don't know of, and then I meet those experts who tell me what they are, and or tell me the importance they've been traditionally. And so I'm always learning something new and exciting. It's BioBlitzes are a scientific snapshot. So we have for much of the Yukon, we don't know a lot about most of the biodiversity. And so if we find a new plant, people always ask, well, was it there? Yeah, is that really a new plant that's moved into the area, or is it just something you've missed? So this is a really good way of making a snapshot of what the area is like now, and look to see what new species are showing up. And it's also a really great way of sharing the enthusiasm for the things that are really cool to the rest of the world that you're used to seeing every day. You know, I don't know how many times I've had to be really excited to see a bald eagle, you know, but we see bald eagles all the time, but there's a lot of people who don't see bald eagles. So there's lots of really cool things that are right in our backyard that are just amazing for people all around the world. But the big part of a BioBlitz is also pulling together everybody. So we work with the Yukon government, we work with the federal government, we work with First Nations governments, we work with municipal governments, we have academics, we have non-governmental organizations, and just communities. So we bring everybody together and to share things, and it's supposed to be fun. You know, it's not a competition, it's all about fun. And so we have a real blast. And I think that's the best part about it. It's supposed to be a social affair. And so it's really neat when people have been working remotely, and, you know, I know this guy's name from Oregon, but I've never met him. And it's really fun to see them meet each other. And you can see from all the logos, all the different organizations that participated in the Kalani Bio Blitz. But the other part that really excites me is getting the youth. And whenever you find something that you've never seen before, I remember, you know, back to the days when I had when everything I was seeing was exciting and new. And so this is a great opportunity to meet with young naturalists and young university students and really show them why I'm passionate about plants or what's so really cool about spiders. I tried to find snails in Yukon, and I had been looking for snails for 10 years, and a snail expert was coming up to the Bio Blitz, and so I was trying not to, get him too over enthusiastic, and so we're setting up his tent. He's been in Tombstone Park for about half an hour, and I say, well, I've been looking for snails for the last 10 years. I've only found about 5 species. And he said, well, I've been here half an hour and I'm up to 16. So, learning how to find something is also really fun. And so we always try and tag students with the experts and get them out, and everybody has a great time. This was one of my favorite ones because sometimes, like this is Lauren, and she seems like a youngster to me, but she's brilliant and she really knew her beetles. And the Yukon youth, actually it was the green team and also wildlife viewing step student. We're having so much fun learning from her, and so they're flipping rocks, they're looking at beetles, and she's trying to explain how you tell the different kinds of beetles. And eventually she just said, this is what I'm talking about. This is carapace, and she's using her tattoos to point it out. So it's really fun for youth to learn from people who are also kind of youth. And so it's a real great way of breaking down barriers and making science fun and not scary. And Yukon has got incredible biodiversity. As I said, we just checked this morning, and in our database we have 8,010 species. So that's not varieties, not subspecies, and those are only things that we believe are here right now. So not things that we think that have been reported once and we're not sure. So what are those? A lot of them are vascular plants. I checked, we still have more vascular plants than beetles. We're beating them by about 50. And then flies. So I'm expecting those are going to surpass vascular plants with more inspection. But it takes you a long time to find any vertebrates, and birds are the biggest group of vertebrates, so things with backbone. They're the biggest groups of things that we regularly study in Yukon. So here's a breakdown by taxonomic group. So you can see beetles are catching up, and I expect next year, after we go to Beaver Creek, beetles will surpass the vascular plants. We'll have to come up with a song for that. I've highlighted the vertebrates, so the species with backbones, but you can see if you add them all up, they're only about 400 species out of 8,000. So all the vertebrates combined, the things that we spend time studying, most of them only occupy about 5% of Yukon's biodiversity. So it's a real rich area. So here's a quick look at the where we've done bioblitzes in the past. So we try to spread them out so we can get a snapshot of places, and we've done quite well. I really want to have a bioblitz in Ivavik. If Parks Canada is listening, Ivavik, we want to have up here, up at the top, Ivavik. But for communities, we've done really well. And our first one was in Carmax, and then we went to Kalani, and then we went to Tombstone, Watson Lake, and then COVID hit. So during COVID, we went to the Wildlife Preserve, which was great. And then last year, COVID hit again, but we still managed to go to Dawson City and the Trondakwichin traditional territory, and managed to have a bioblitz. And next year, we're planning on, this year, I guess we're this year now, we're planning on having one in Beaver Creek. So stay tuned. And the neat thing about a BioBlitz is we can also decide how much area we can survey. So it isn't a fixed size. So this represents the actual areas covered by each of the BioBlitzes. So Tombstone, it was the boundaries of the park. Carmax, it was, I think, 30 kilometers within the center of Carmax. And Kalani was 15 kilometers. The wildlife preserve was just within the boundaries of the wildlife preserve, and you can see Watson Lake down there. So we haven't decided what the boundaries of Beaver Creek are going to be yet. So from our humble beginnings, I'd never heard of a BioBlitz. We did one, YCS did one in Whitehorse in 2015, and that's the first time I'd ever heard of a BioBlitz. And then the Biological Survey of Canada said, we want to do a BioBlitz in Yukon. And so I said, sure, how can we help? We had no money and they had some money, but they had a lot of real keen people. So we had our first BioBlitz based out of the campground in Carmax. Coal mine campground.
Yeah.
And it was great because we had a few cabins, we had lots of camping space, and we had somebody to feed us. We could buy our food, we could have our coffee, and it was great. They had lots of fire pits and places where we could gather. So that was a lot of fun. Then we decided this worked out well. So we decided to have one. We partnered with Kalani First Nation and the Champagne Ajac First Nation and Parks Canada, and we held one at the Kalani Lake Research Station. It limited us because we could only have so many people staying, mainly because we could only have so many toilets. We were limited by the number of flush toilets we could have. But we did have about 60 plus people, and we broke into 9 teams. So in the bottom right corner, that's what a team is. So we would try and send a parks person to keep us safe, a student to keep us enthusiastic, wake up all the slower people. We tried to have a botanist, an entomologist, and a birder in each group. So we had a diversity of disciplines, and we fly them up with a helicopter, drop them off on a mountaintop, and leave them there for the day. And we got most of them back, so it was great. And that worked out so well that we decided to have one up in Tombstone. And lo and behold, we were still limited by camping, but the Yukon Parks really stepped up. They created a new campground for us right north of the Tombstone campground, and we ended up having over 100 participants. In fact, for our presentation, our evening presentations, we stuffed the visitor center, and I think there was 120 people at the presentation, standing room only. But we managed to use Trans-North helicopter, and we flew all these people up onto the mountains, and some of them had to hike back, and some of them got picked up and moved around. But it was a really nasty, cloudy, rainy day, at least in the southern part of the park. And so thumbs up and hats off to the Trans-North, because they were great. Watson Lake BioBlitz was a really neat area, and what really thrilled me was the First Nation participation. We had really strong First Nation participation, not only from the Liard First Nation, but the Dease Lake First Nation. And I believe we had people all the way up from Telegraph Creek. And so it was really a lot of fun. And we had some worm experts there, which was also very exciting. And so that was a lot of fun. And then the wildlife preserve, well, I like this photo because I didn't doctor this. I just wanted to see if I could capture the biggest gathering. And that was us. And so you can see how well we're social distancing, because the only people who are standing beside each other are actually in the same bubble. They're there with their partners. So we're maybe not quite a caribou all the time, but we're pretty close, and we are outside. And interestingly, we got almost 700 species detected during that BioBlitz. And then last year, we again had a COVID, and we were a little bit closer because we're getting used to each other now. But we were still staying outside and trying to keep separated, and we moved in groups. And everyone just had a blast. Look at the weather. It was just gorgeous. So now I'm going to just give you a bit of a summary on some of what we've, or a little bit more on how we gather the information. So for those of you who haven't experienced iNaturalist, I definitely recommend just Google www.inaturalist.ca. I guess you don't Google that, you just type it into the bar, or you can Google inaturalist.ca. And it's a great way of getting information about Yukon species. All those little boxes within Yukon are places where people have made observations. So we still have a few holes in there to fill up in the most remote areas, but you can see we have pretty good coverage of Yukon. So what I do is I make a project, and we'll show you these. The other good thing about using iNaturalist, so we can superimpose a shape. So we put this half circle in, and we said in as our project. So anybody who uploads a photo to iNaturalist during the set period of the BioBlitz that are within this circle, it automatically sends all that data to me. So it's a really easy way. You don't have to hand me your bird checklist or send me an email. You can just upload the images. And the nice thing is then we have a documented record. We have a photograph, and we don't have to touch anything. We don't have to pick anything. And so it's a great way of being really low impact on the land and having excellent scientific information. So this is what a post would look like. It starts off, you can click somewhere to get more information, and it will show the number of observations over here on the left, and the number of species it's recording, and the number of people who submit photos. So we've been trying to drum those numbers up, so keep an eye on those. And during this BioBlitz, we only had 575, but it was our first, and still vascular plants did really well. You can see that. The next one was the Kalani Bio Blitz, and we had a few more people uploading photos. I actually uploaded photos for this one. You can see there 27 observations by Bruce Bennett. That's pretty good. Lucy, who put this all together, she was trying to train us, and she had 800 of the 1,000 photos. But if we went up and got 355 species, these are just the ones that were uploaded, and you can see I think our numbers are now over 900 species. We didn't quite get to 1,000 for Kalani, but there were a lot of Kalani is so cool. It seems like every rock you flip over, you'll find something new for science. And interestingly, we had a botanist come by, and she was looking for this plant called Potentilla Gypsonia, and she found it right by the visitor center at on Tachadal, but when she brought the specimens home, she realized that there was something different about it, and it turned out this is a plant that grows on the prairies. So you find it in southern Saskatchewan. It was described from southern Saskatchewan, southern Alberta, sort of northern Montana, that the top of the Great Plains. And the ones in Kalani were disjunct. We have a whole bunch of these Great Plains disjunct. So meaning that it's like 1,600 kilometers from over the Rocky Mountains to where they occur. And they've evolved in situ in Kalani. And so that was a brand new species to science. And as you can see, it's named Kalani sankfoil. And it was really great because we were able to work with the First Nation and they were part of the publication too. So for the Tombstone Bioblitz, we started to get a lot more observers. We are up to 22 now. And we still didn't have very many. Look at that. We only had 354 species, but we ended up with over 1,000 species in total. And again, we got some nice new things and some real surprising things. So,
Bruce,
yeah.
Can you just clarify, like, why does that number change? You said we eventually we got over 1,000 species. So why does that number change?
So these are, when you're putting it into iNaturalist, it's based on a photograph. So we only had 354 of our species photographed, but there are a lot of species that you can't identify from photos, and there are other things that that people had collected and then identified later. So
okay.
You can't get every species, but you can get a huge number of them, and that's what's so fun about our latest ones. Because we started learning at this point, I bet if we got really good photographers, Ryan Seeley, and Josine and John Reynolds, these are people who take amazing photos and take a huge number of photos. So they're scientists as well, but they're also photographers. So you don't necessarily have to be a great scientist if you're a great photographer. So you'll see those numbers are bumping up.
Okay, so those numbers are just the ones that we got photos of, but then if someone heard a bird or something and they entered it later, that added to the total.
Yeah, and we're as a scientist, because a lot of the ones like this, like the one I'm going to tell you about now, there was this.
Look at that segue. All right.
There's this spider, and the only thing. So what are these things that look like lumpy cacti? Anybody guess? I guess it takes too long to guess.
I don't know.
Those are
really creepy.
Their mouth parts. And that's how you identify this species. And when we collected this species up on top of White Hat Mountain in Tombstone, we didn't know what it was. And then they brought it back to the Royal BC Museum and they didn't know what it was. So they sent it off for barcoding to the University of Guelph. And there's an expert there, Jürgen Blagoff from the University of Guelph. And he knows these little spiders and also looks at their genetics. And he figured out what genus they were really quickly, but it wasn't any species he knew of. So he reached out to his colleagues in Russia and figured out that indeed this was a species new to North America. It was something that was thought to be endemic to Russia. It's not known in Alaska, and we found it in Tombstone. And the really cool thing was they had collected both males at the top and females at the bottom. So you've got both sexes, and that was really, so spider people get all excited about this, but it's great. But this one I thought was really interesting. We collected this earthworm on just under the willows, just off the road. There's a road that goes up to the microwave tower on the Dempster Highway, and somebody was going under the willows at the side of the road there, and they picked up this earthworm. And they brought it back, and I said, "You found an earthworm?" You did collect it, didn't you? Because you need to collect earthworms to be able to identify them to species. And he goes, oh yeah, I got it. And so I sent it down to the expert who is in Kitchener, Ontario. And he came back and he said, where did you get this? And I said, it's up from Tombstone. He says, this species is only known from 2 counties on either side of the Columbia River, I think it is, on the border between Washington and Oregon. It's the only place in the world this species is known. And so then it's like, okay, is this something that somebody brought up with their motorhome, or is this something that persisted in Beringia during and was separated by the ice sheets? We always think of, you know, animals being separated. Well, here's earthworms that were separated by the ice sheets. And so he was so excited about this earthworm. He showed up for the next BioBlitz in Watson Lake, and we arranged to have him go into really remote areas where there weren't the possibility of introductions. So we went to the mountains in Kalani, and he found this earthworm again. So now this earthworm is known more from Yukon than it is from anywhere else in the world. So that's really exciting. There's very few places in the world you can go and find, in Canada, and find native earthworms. Yukon and the coastal areas of BC, and I think the East Coast, there's a couple, but almost all the earthworms in Canada are all exotic. And we're finding really neat new things with earthworms. So yes, his name was John Reynolds, but he was a different John Reynolds that took the most photos here. This John Reynolds is also the chair of the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, but he's got a very quick finger for photographing things. And so he added 800 observations of 280 species. I almost caught him, but not quite. But that's 10 times, more than 10 times more than when I entered into Kalani. And you can see now our numbers are going up. So we only had 760 species when I finished the BioBlitz, and 734 of them were photographed. So so as we get better at looking for little things and trying to take those photos, this is a way we're doing that. And interestingly, we got a new bird for Yukon at that BioBlitz. But the ones that really got me excited was the Goblins Gold. And if you see big trees that blow over and they rip up the root mound, and there's that dark hollow underneath the root mound, and if you look in that hole and you see something glowing gold, that's Goblins Gold. It's a type of bioluminescent moss, and it had never been reported from Yukon, although the bryologists have been expecting it. That looks like it's a flash photography. That's my photo without a flash, showing the glowing moss under these stumps. So cool. Who knew? Goblins Gold. And the other one, this was another John Reynolds photograph. So he was just photographing everything. And so he photographed everything, and then he uploaded them all onto iNaturalist. And then we looked and we went, that's an orchid. That's a Malaxis. That isn't known in Yukon. It was a new species of orchid found in Yukon. He didn't know when he photographed it. And he was just taking photographs of as many different plants that he could find. And so thank you very much, John Reynolds, for another new species. The Yukon Wildlife Preserve, we actually did find four new species, but as I was preparing today, I didn't track down what they were. I know that the wasp was a little wasp that didn't have any common name, but I didn't manage to figure out what the other ones were. Sorry, Yukon Wildlife Preserve. But it was still pretty impressive that we got 613 species. And I think our numbers, as I say, this is usually a snapshot immediately following. And as things get identified over time, we're adding to them. So, and then last year we had, we now look at the number of observations. And I really want to have a challenge between Ryan Seeley, who's been our leader in photographing at the Wildlife Preserve and last year, but this year I'm hoping to have both of them photographing together. So that'll be the real challenge. And so you can see we've gone up to almost 3,000 observations of 784 species that we got photographs for. And I think this slide's getting a little dated because I just got another batch of identifications, and not all our beetles are in. But I'm expecting that we should end up finally with, I'm hoping for more than 1,000. That's always my goal. So far, Tombstone's the only one that we've actually broken 1,000 for. But again, some real fun ones. So here's a stone scorpion that Ryan Seeley photographed, and I had a look and I went, I've never seen that before. That's the weirdest looking, stone centipede, not scorpion. And so I contacted the people at the University of Guelph, and they said, yes, we've got 2 of them. And so Ryan photographed this one, and they collected 2. And Ryan photographed this beetle, which was new to Yukon, and they collected that beetle. So it's a new species for Yukon. But we ended up with at least 40 new species, a lot of new spiders added from the Tombstone, or sorry, that Trondaquichin Bioblitz. Interestingly, I've just did some adding up some numbers for the State of the Environment report, looking at exotic species, and for the Trondaquichin Bioblitz, we only had exotic plants. We have no exotic invertebrates that we were found, which is really significant, because about almost, well, we're getting something like 35% of our exotic species are insects and other invertebrates, but no exotic species, even though we spend a heck of a lot of time sucking spiders off of walls in Dawson City and flipping rocks on the way to the dinner. So you would think that we'd find something, but it's still pretty pristine in the old Dawson City. But one thing that I was really excited about is I was looking at iNaturalist. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I looked, and Christina had posted this photo, and I knew immediately it was a plant that I'd been looking for almost 30 years. It's a plant that was described from Dawson City, well, from Dawson. You know, back in 1920, the type locality, the place it was described from was Dawson, but it's never been reported from Dawson since. And we didn't know what somebody meant by Dawson. And I'm sitting there going through, and I went, oh my God, she found it. It's the Yukon fleabane, Symphotrichium Erigeron yukonensis. And it's right on the 8th Avenue Trail, right at the beginning, and the whole slope is covered with it. And but that's the only place I've ever seen it in Yukon. So really exciting. You just don't know what's in your backyard. In fact, we found the type locality of Williamson's catchfly and another type locality in Dawson. So that was pretty neat. That's a lot of fun. This shows the breakdown of the species that we saw during the Trondaquichin Bioblitz. So the plants are still the winners. And here it's a breakdown of the species. See, look at that. I've already added a bunch of species to it. So we have 915 in this one, and we only had 800 and something in the last one. So it goes up as I gather up more information. We probably won't be finding more vascular plants or birds or mammals, but there's still a chance that other species will show up. So this shows a breakdown. I thought it was pretty interesting that in both the Kalani Bio Blitz and the Trundaquichin Bio Blitz, we had more spiders seen than birds. And the other really interesting thing about that statistic is when I compared the two, there were not a lot of matches. They only overlap by about 30%. So it's not like you're seeing the same spiders. They're seeing completely different spiders. And
between Tombstone and Trundaquichin?
Between Kalani and Trundaquichin.
Oh, so quite a few different species, just like moving vertically.
Yeah, because if you went down to Kalani, you would see a Swainson's thrush, a yellow-rumped warbler, a dark-eyed junco. If you went to Dawson, you'd see, the same species. But what I found with the spiders is the ones in Kalani are quite different. There was very little overlap. They were almost completely, it was a different species list. And part of it is because the experts were different. So some of the people preferred banging bushes and other ones like flipping rocks. And so you're searching different habitats. But I thought that was kind of an interesting insight. And this sort of shows you, the other species where we had less than 10. I think our record for amphibians is 2. Watson Lake, we had both the western toad and the wood frog, but it's hard to get more than 2 species of amphibians. And I think we had 5 fishes. So next year, we're going to go out towards Beaver Creek. And so that kind of weird squiggly line, that is where the ice apparently was during the last full glaciation. So the idea is that we're trying to hit some of the unglaciated areas. So the areas immediately around the community of Beaver Creek have not been glaciated, and the mountaintops above the glaciers have also remained ice-free. So we're expecting, this is the farthest west community in all of Canada, so we're hoping that we're going to find new species for Canada during this. And I've booked the White River Lodge to be the center of the BioBlitz. So if this presentation has inspired you and you want to join future BioBlitzes, please feel free to contact me, or you can contact Carrie because she knows how to get a hold of me, but very easy, bruce.bennett@yukon.ca. So thank you very much, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Your enthusiasm for BioBlitzes and plants and nature in general is just always so contagious. And as much as sometimes we go for walks together and make it, all of 5 feet, and we haven't, 40 minutes have gone by and I'm rolling my eyes, but it never fails to transfer to the group, and that energy just shared comes back at you. It's so wonderful. I'm just waiting to see if any more comments or questions come in. Just a lot of positive feedback for folks. Elise was wondering maybe if you would consider Old Crow for a site to see about going further north. I don't know if that's ever been considered.
Oh, we would love to do Old Crow. And Old Crow is one of those places that many scientists go to visit because you can fly there and there's a community. But that was one of the places that Sid Cannings went in the 80s. And so we've got some pretty good snapshots of old crow in the 80s, but there hasn't been something similar. So we would certainly, maybe that'll be 2023. That's my last BioBlitz as a that I'm organizing will be 2023. So
Well, famous last words. We'll get you back.
well, I'll still participate in any that Carrie continue to host.
I'm sure you would. And a lot of the photos and wildlife viewing publications include Bruce dragging his family through the bushes. And then I think that Seth and Kaylee probably know more about this stuff than most Yukoners because they've just had to absorb it from you over the years. It's a great presentation. Debbie was wondering if this video will be available after. Yes, it'll live on our Facebook page, but also it'll be exported and uploaded to YouTube and then filed under Yukon Biologist. So you can find the video there as well. And so just while we're waiting to see if any more questions come in, I wanted to point out a couple things. For those of you who are familiar with iNaturalist, or even if you're not, there's another app called Seek, which is by iNaturalist, and it's done. It's a little bit more kid oriented. I don't know if this works or not. Whatever. But you download it. You don't have to register. You don't have to log in. So it kind of removes a little bit of that privacy concern that people might have. And it's really good for kids because it tries to identify something in real time, and then they collect badges. So if you get 5 flowers, then you get your flower badge, or 10 insects or something like that, and they have little challenges. So for folks that are looking for ways to keep kids engaged and observing and interested in nature, I know it's worked on some of my nieces and nephews when you're out on a nature walk and they kind of start dragging their feet a bit. When you pull, I know we don't want to have screens always in nature, but it can engage them and get them thinking and looking and trying to identify things. So it's another good one. But that looks to be just about it. And again, if you're interested to learn more about iNaturalist and the folks who document and use that information, I highly recommend an episode of a podcast called In Defense of Plants. It's a really good podcast, and episode 321 is called Rapid Changes in Slow Growing Ecosystems. And one of the things that he mentions in that is the expanding ranges or the changing ranges of different plants in particular, but all wildlife, just as our climate changes and our world changes. And what's interesting about that for Yukon is that we are at the northern limit of a lot of species. And so I really encourage folks to use iNaturalist and to document what they see, because you might not even realize that what you're documenting, what you're taking a photo of is special and it is unique. Like I bet you no one here really thought that an earthworm would be an earth-shattering thing to find. But it is a really special thing. And I know, Bruce, I can't remember the exact details, but I took a photo of a ladybug up on the Snake last summer, and you said it was quite far out of what the documented range is. And who knows if that was just a random ladybug or if that really is the range. But if more people would take a photo of ladybugs and upload them then while they're paddling the Peel rivers, then maybe we would have a better understanding of where those species live. So, all right, well, I think that we'll wrap it up there. And thanks so much, Bruce. And folks can find this conversation on YouTube later on. And I'll talk to you tomorrow at the office. All right.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.